times out of 10, someone that just wants to get a bit stronger or lose a bit of weight, it's nothing to do with the exercise, really. It's about the...
We're joined by Bobby Rich, world-class fitness consultant, known for training elite clients like David Beckham, Guy Ritchie, Madonna and Jason Statham. Bobby shares his science-backed approach to peak performance, mindset mastery and living healthier, stronger lives.
Every time I walk in, there'd be 3, 4, 5 minutes of just small talk. It's not just trying to gather information just for the sake of gathering information. It's trying to find out how they slept, what they've eaten, what's their mindset, what's their approach going to be to the session today.
Studies show that elite runners spend 80% of their time focusing on low-intensity training and honing the fundamentals, and only 20% pushing hard.
Try and work with your body around the sleep, around the recovery, around your day, but try and be taking someone who's, let's say David Haye, for instance, who's a world heavyweight champion, who's literally conquered the world and smashes people for a living, and he's clearly doing quite well. And then I come in and I'm like, right, so today we're going to do squat, and that's all we're going to focus on today.
92% of the population have at least one mineral or vitamin deficiency, which is, people that are addicted to chocolate often have a manganese or a magnesium deficiency, or people that are addicted to eating nuts can have a zinc deficiency. Tell us why you're a huge advocate of the fundamentals of training. Bobby Rich, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've worked with top stars like Madonna, Jason Statham, Guy Ritchie, and the Beckhams. What is it that you offer that allowed you to work with some of the most incredible names in the entire world?
An understanding. I mean, that's taken time to understand. I got thrusted in the world quite early and didn't understand much, but quickly understood the individuals that were in the limelight and the external stresses that their life had on them, and how to maneuver around that to help them outside of their world in the gym or on the track or in the ring, whatever it might have been. I think that was probably one of my biggest assets, is understanding, listening, feedback from clients, looking at the bigger picture, not necessarily just looking. There's aspects of health and fitness we need to look at here and now, but the bigger picture.
So how did it all start?
2004, I met the director, Guy Ritchie. Guy Ritchie is a Jiu Jitsu enthusiast. And so Judo is my background. Started when I was 6 years old, and that was the bulk of my interest in life. Even today, I'm coaching a lot of judo now, but that was my life. At the time, I met Guy. We met through a mutual friend. My coach was at the Budokai Judo Club on Gilson Road, just down the road. And the jiu-jitsu team, they trained downstairs. And at the end of the session, towards the end of our session, they would come upstairs and come and do some of the groundwork with some of the judo guys. And at that time, Guy came up one day. And I think his producer or his assistant at the time had become a producer, and Guy was looking for someone that was all-encompassing, that could take care of him from fitness and coaching to assisting to, I guess he was asking someone at a judo club, my coach, who could fight or could, so look after himself, could also be security at the same time as well. So it was all kind of an all-encompassing role. Sadly, we're talking 2004, so there was very little money, even less than there is now with partnerships and Instagram and social media that you can generate revenue. But at the time, there was not much. So for me, as an athlete, getting a job offer from someone like Guy, who also understood the position that I was in, I still had 3 or 4 years left trying to achieve what I wanted to in the sporting world. And he was very understanding. But yeah, that's how it started. All my relationships from there and all the names you mentioned pretty much came from that meeting and working with Guy on a number of films and commercials. And so that's quite a random start to.
I mean, it's awesome though. It's often the way, but I think if you're rubbish at your job, then it wouldn't happen like that. You'd meet someone, then it would fizzle out. Well, I think it's a testament to the quality of your work and your determination, because I think a lot of people like attaching to that, as in terms of, he's dedicated or he's the best at this, therefore I want to hang out with him and I want to learn from him. And I think one thing I've noticed amongst, let's say the high achievers or the ridiculously successful people I've either met or are friends with, is that they trust people as heuristics around them, as in this person knows, for instance, crypto. I would use that one as an example. This person knows crypto better than me. Okay, what's the heuristic? Do I trust them? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to listen to what they say. Or like everyone used to do with their doctors. Oh, the doctor knows better than me, therefore I'm going to trust the doctor. Until you realize, actually, I can't trust the doctor, or I can't trust my friend's crypto tips, for instance. And I think when it comes to something that's as important as, you know, training, physique, mindset, or any of these things with some of the, you know, they are some of the biggest names in the world, let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
They need to be sure that they're working with the right people. And if you were crap, they wouldn't recommend you on.
I mean, we're here 20 years later, so I think I'm doing an all right job. I think my position in judo and how I approached, you know, judo and what I was doing to support my journey in judo. I was trying to get to the games. I didn't quite make it. 2008, I was an Olympic alternate. But everything, how I dedicated what my mindset was to what I needed to do in the gym, on the track, in the dojo, that bled over to how I conducted myself and how I saw that could also benefit others. So I think I was fortunate enough that the individuals such as Guy, such as Jason, David, Victoria, all those names, they do exactly that. They're surrounded by all sorts of people that want things from people, from them. So they have the pick of the bunch, but when they make that pick, they listen, which is really refreshing. You know, I did something recently talking about David, and David's, you know, he's like a coach's dream. You know, so when you do get those individuals and they trust what you're telling them, and they're willing to follow the process, how long it takes, that's essential. So I think, that was a huge part of that. I was also, I'm sitting here now on your podcast, happy to be somewhat in the limelight, but I was also at that time, and still today, I'm very happy to be the person in the shadows, making things work, as opposed to being thrusted in the limelight.
So is there something in your training that particularly attracts the top talent, or is it, do you think, the more overarching, he's awesome and he can cover this area? What would you say?
I think it was a bit of both. But it's probably my background in sport and my mindset and my approach to how I conduct myself. I know that certainly to be the truth. I was fortunate to meet David Haye and Adam Booth. David Haye at the time was the world heavyweight boxing champion. Adam Booth was the head trainer at the Third Space. I was part of the founding team of the coaches at the Third Space. And he had taken David on. Fast forward several years on, I had left the Third Space. They had moved on. And he had a very big fight coming up with Klitschko. And he just wanted something a little bit different. He had a number of trainers before me that were of serious caliber, but he just wanted to try something a little bit different with someone who had the expertise, but also had the knowledge of what it took to be in combat. It's a very different sport. I never wanted to get into boxing. I hate being punched in the face. I have no time for it, although I sit here with cauliflower ears and broken fingers, and it's a very different sport. So, but he wanted someone, he made it very clear that he wanted someone that knew what it took to stand in front of someone, and someone's trying to physically take something away from you, whether it be throw you on your back or knock you out, or, you know. So that was, with David, that was probably, he just wanted that someone understood somewhat the position he's being in, even though I don't have any fame. I'm not standing in the ring. A judo tournament is very different. Fighting in front of 1,000 people to, I think we ended up fighting Derek Chisora in front of 30,000 people at West Ham Football Club. So it's very different, but there was things that we could relate to, you know, when we're trying to get a little bit more out of a conditioning session, strength session, or cardiovascular session, whatever it might be, and I'm asking something a little more of him. It probably left less doubt in him that, you know, that I knew what I was talking about. So
it's actually funny because I, as you see, I'm an ectomorph, and putting weight on is quite difficult, actually. Yeah. And I've always trained on and off throughout my whole life. But then I read Atomic Habits, I think it was like 3 years ago. And I was like, I'm going to have to get a trainer because it'll hold me accountable. Even though I hold myself accountable to a lot of things, it's still not quite the same. You've got someone that's pushing you. And I've worked with quite a few different trainers now. You know, a good one, like, or someone that has your back, and they know their stuff just from the micro things that go on. And it's like, it's interesting. And there's actually 2 trainers I've worked with at the Body Lab in London, on Kensington High Street. And there's 2 I really, really, really love there, actually. They're both so different, but they're both so excellent in different areas that I like working with both of them. Yeah. Whereas other trainers are just kind of like, do this, and it's like tick box. It's like, one thing Callum over at the Body Lab said to me once actually really resonated with me. He said, and he's an empath, strong empath. I like to put the personal in personal training. Yeah. Because most people forget the personal bit. And so he remembers everything, like lists everything down, even the topics we talk about and stuff like that. So it's, I guess. By the way,
off topics.
Yeah.
Nothing related to the gym, but about your environment at home or friendships, relationships that all play into how that person's performing in that moment. It's really important.
How's your relationship right now, for instance?
100%. It might be an indirect way to find out about how you're feeling or who you are and what you're doing and what you can give today. But it's, it's all part of the past, like you say, the personal touch.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. To the next level.
Yeah. But I mean, listen, I'm sure I've been guilty at points when you get quite familiar with, not so much clients, but you have training partners that you train with, and you can go completely off topic and you end up talking about too much yourself. But I have seen it with coaches in the past, and it should always be about the coach and the person in front of you.
Yeah, it's not quite like the barber relationship. Where
no, there's been moments.
So, what's the secret? What's the secret, do you think, to keeping someone like David at the top of his game year after year after year?
It's not consistency for me. I mean, I'm, about as boring as it comes when it comes to the approach of training and sort of mindset. It's finding a way that you can just be consistent and works for the individuals. And I have my methodologies and how I approach things and what I take away from my career, my experiences with my own sporting career, and what I've done with clients in the past to help them peak. But everyone is very different. So it's just being able to adapt. So, I can talk about consistency, but what does consistency look like? I think people get wrapped up looking right here, right now, which again, like I said earlier, we have to keep aware of that, but it's looking at the bigger picture. So when I'm talking about consistency, I'm not always just talking about what have you done this week? You can go as far as, okay, so it's New Year's Eve. Look back at the whole entire year. How many days did you take off? It's when you look at it like that, you're like, oh, actually 4 weeks out of a whole year, or, 6 weeks of doing a lighter intensity program, or 2 months, when you look at it like that, you go, actually, that's not bad. But when you look at a week and you're like, oh, I didn't train 3 times this week, or you look at a month and I took a week and a half off, people get a little bit, and then when you work with individuals like the likes of David, who, he's a family man and that's a priority to him. But then his work is, I mean, I don't know anyone like it in terms of travel, so it's not just the time that he spends traveling, it's also the time that he spends traveling to different time zones. So having to deal with that when he comes back, or if we're training remotely, it's just having to understand that lifestyle. And again, even from the emotional side we're talking about, where someone like that steps out of their hotel room or out of their car, and it's from the minute someone sees them, it's can I get, pulling, physically or emotionally at these people. So it's understanding a lifestyle.
It's actually a really interesting point, because I heard a quote like 2 years ago now, which actually helped change my consistency. It's actions speak louder than words, but consistency speaks louder than actions. And it's like so true, because it's like, you can say, okay, well, I go to the gym, saying it, to I'm going to the gym, doing it, but consistency of those speaks much louder. Yeah. And I think it's actually, so when I work with the trainers, it's funny because they say, right, 12 reps or whatever. Yeah. I always do 14. And if they say 14, I do 16. They're like, why do you always do this little bit more? And I was like, do you realize the compounding effect of these two? It pushes me that little bit more. And over the year, do you realize how many reps extra?
But then you'll have your coach saying, well, if you can do that, you should have picked up a heavier weight. So be careful what you wish for.
Which they do. But the thing is, I think,
you're right.
Yeah, but it's the consistency speaks louder than actions. Yeah. And I love that. So it's really nice that you touched on the consistency aspect. And
it's also, I'm slightly older now, and the intensity of my sessions, I'm really consider the intensity of my sessions. But I would possibly be in a better place now if even knowing what I knew as a coach, sometimes it was hard to implement that into what I was trying to achieve as a judoka, trying to get to the Olympics. Sometimes it was just, you get caught up in the politics and selection process. And back then there was no social media. No, so we're looking at 2004, 2005, very little. I think MySpace at the time, but you certainly wasn't, now we can see what other competitors are doing, in Japan, in Russia, and wherever it is in the world. And you can see and you can kind of understand. But when you don't know what other people are doing, there was a time where I'm just going to work harder. And, today now I'm probably paying the price of that a little bit. I have arthritis in my knee. I had a knee surgery years back, and it's deteriorated over time where I have osteoarthritis. But I now really consider, if you have consistency over intensity, obviously you want to peak and you want to push at times, but really paying attention to. So that is a huge thing with someone like David, who's traveling in different time zones. His body clock is all over the place. His diet is all over the place, from what he's eating to when he's eating, how he's sleeping, so when he turns up, it's like, I might have a program, right? This is today we're working on power, but he may turn up and he walk in, he's like, and we have to adjust it and adapt it. So yeah, but
it's interesting. Two things is a friend of mine, Dr. Dom Nischwitz, he was telling me about, I guess, big into skateboarding ever since he was a kid. And he's a surgeon, by day, but a skateboarding dude by night. I'm not joking. It's actually such a contrast,
Yeah.
But one of the things he was telling me is that, like, when he was learning skating as a teenager, there was comic books or magazines where you'd see step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. And people would mimic that in 4 or 5 steps. Right. So everyone would have a very similar pattern, but had to learn the bits in between these moves. Now with social media, you're seeing the whole...
Pause.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're seeing the whole pattern from end to end. So there's actually less creativity, but then people are pushing the boundaries. So it's really interesting how social media has shaped this type of thing. The other thing is that, with the different time zones and traveling, I mean, I do around 100 flights a year, and, health and sleep is the priority for me. So I've learned the hacks to do it, but it's still...
I imagine when you're getting off the other end, you don't have the luxury of, okay, I've got a day or two where I can decompress. I imagine where your schedule is, you're literally off and you've got to...
Depends.
Got to go.
I mean, for instance, last Wednesday I flew to Vegas. Had a daytime flight.
I think I saw your setup on the plane.
It was ridiculous on the way over, but it set me up for success opposed to failure. And then flying back, I took a night flight, worked half, slept half. But the thing is still coming back. Like, it's taken me 2 days to get back into the grips of it. But running at 60%. So I can only imagine what it's like for David being boing, 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 and always operating at 60%. So I guess you got to really account for that in what you're doing when you're pushing him, right?
Massively. And there's other times he'll come back and I've underestimated what he's got in the tank, and he comes back and he's like, right, I'm good to go. But even with sessions like that, you have to, is that adrenaline? Is that just because he's not been in the gym for a few days? Does he really want that? And that's when you have to weigh up as a coach of, when you talk about the bigger picture, looking at all the aspects, like, it's too easy to go, oh, he's told me he feels like this. But actually, he's told me that. But there's several things that I've noticed as he's walked in, or not just David, but any client that walk in and, they've told me they haven't drunk any water, they slept badly, or, these little things that I always, every time I walk in, there'd be 3, 4, 5 minutes of just small talk. And, it's small talk for purpose. It's not just trying to gather information just for the sake of gathering information. It's trying to find out how they slept, what they've eaten, what's their mindset, what's their approach going to be to the session today. So it's a tricky thing to master. But I think that's part of why I'm in the world.
So that's the empath part of you that I can see quite clearly. It's interesting you say that, because it serves a good purpose.
Yeah.
Obviously. So for the average person, is the same sort of approach and dedication required as it is for like this type of performer or athlete?
Totally depends on what they want out of it. What the individual who comes to me and wants to train wants out of it, physically, mentally. I do my approach towards it in terms of how I approach cycles of training is very similar to, looking at a macro cycle throughout the year, breaking it down and, understanding that even if someone isn't a performing athlete on a track or on a football pitch or in a ring, their competition or they're peaking for the boardroom or they're peaking for a conference that they've got to talk at or set up, so performance is very different to each and every one, but so there is an adaptation of how I approach it, but my approach in terms of how I look at a year is much the same.
Hey guys, if you haven't heard, the Paleo Revival is here. This April in Austin, Texas, the tribe is getting back together again at the Health Optimization Summit. Learn how 35 industry legends like Gary Brecker, Mark Sisson, Ben Greenfield, JJ Virgin and more optimize their health and how you can too. Spend the weekend surrounded by ancestral wisdom, exploring cutting-edge health tech, and connecting with a tribe that makes you feel, like family. Austin, this is long overdue, but the wait is finally over. Get your ticket today at hosummit.com/Austin.
Studies show that elite runners spend 80% of their time focusing on low-intensity training and honing the fundamentals, and only 20% pushing hard.
Yep.
Now, tell us why you're a huge advocate of the fundamentals of training.
I just, certainly in this day and age where, again, you talked about social media earlier, and it's a phenomenal tool. It's part of the reason why we're here today. And I absolutely love it. And there's endless amount of information there that we can take, and as long as it's used well and wisely with consideration and do your own due diligence. But it's when someone's trying you're talking about elite runners, so that's slightly different, but to your average Joe who's just starting their journey and there's too much out there, sometimes that's like, I have no idea where to start, so I'm not going to start. So for me, whether you're an elite athlete or whether you're just someone starting, it's just that foundational build, the strength, the foundations are just absolutely key, So I talk a lot about, the athletes I've worked with, we go down rabbit holes with body mechanics and certain positions. And so it's, we go way beyond the fundamentals, but even when you're doing that, we then strip it. There's still times where we're doing some of the strength sessions that we're doing. There's still your squat, there's still your deadlift, there's still a push, there's still a press. But when you go back to talk about elite runners, it's funny because 20 years ago when we were at the third space, we had a couple of runners there. We actually had Paula Radcliffe come into the third space. That was just mind-blowing. They had a hypoxic chamber. They've still got one at the third space in Soho, which we touched. That was just, that kind of thrusted when I met David and Adam, but the third space at the time there was no other space like it. It was an integrated fitness and wellness space. So they had the medical center, they had the hypoxic chamber, they had the Pilates studio, and then the caliber of trainers that they had there from 6 months to 8 months prior to the third space opening was just incredible. And what they did is they had elite runners like Paula Radcliffe come in. And just jaw-dropping. Just to see her in the hypoxic chamber, I think she was, I can't remember, I don't want to, I'll probably do her an injustice, but she was, maxed out the treadmill at 20 kilometers per hour in a hypoxic chamber, and it was just beyond. But, what happened, you start doing a little bit of digging, back then, it was the intensity of the sessions were so high, but the intensity of the sessions came from running. So you had these endurance athletes, elite athletes, even just your average marathon runners that wanted to take part in the London Marathon. They did most of their training, probably 80% of it at the time, was done through running training on the treadmill, out on the track, out on the streets. 20% was, most people back then were very scared of hitting the weights room and working on the fundamental or foundational strength work. Whereas now, as you know, it's taken a huge shift where it is about that foundational strength, building that, and then that 20-30% of that intensity training needs to be peaked, because you can't maintain that all year round. So yeah, it's a big shift.
I love the mindset, especially around the word fundamentals, which is one of the things that resonated with me when I was digging deeper into your work. I talk about the fundamentals of health.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I did a trip in India earlier on this year, and it was to a longevity clinic in Chennai, and it's like $6,000, full body MRI, 190 blood biomarkers, urine tests, cold adaptation testing, ultrasound of every organ, the full shebang, the full 360 of health for like $5,000-6,000. And with me was Simland, who's a good friend of mine, a well-known biohacker in his 20s. Chris Gethin, who's ex-face of bodybuilding.com, very, very dear friend of mine, actually, as well as a whole load of other well-known biohackers or avid biohackers and longevity people.
Right.
And I sat down, they asked me to give me a quick ad lib chat. So I asked them to rate themselves on a 1 to 10 on how well they sleep well, eat well, hydrate well, sun well, ground well, move well, love well, fuck well, a whole list of my fundamentals, right? Out of a potential 120 points, what do you think the average score was?
100.
48.
48.
So really? On average, they're hitting 48%, like less than 48% actually, because it was out of 120 points.
Right, okay.
So the point is there they are though. One of them was taking 70 different supplements a day.
Right.
So the question is as a pro biohacker, should you get the fundamentals nailed? Yes. Should you do the last 20%? Not yet. And there is a point where you should do the fundamentals. You should nail them. And it's like anyone that's saying that they're focusing on the last bit, you would question. So I love the fundamental mindset.
That's what I love about you. And you have this accessibility to sort of simplify biohacking, almost like, I don't want to do disservice, but like almost an entry level, for people that want to make a difference in their life, but don't know how to, don't really understand it, don't have what they think the time or the means or whatever it is to go the full 9 yards. But that's where you can simplify it for people to understand. And it's those things that, sleep, nutrition, daylight, strength training, the fundamentals, get all those ticked off first. And some of those entry level sort of biohacks that you have, that introduce them, but you've got too many people right now, they're skipping that and then going here.
I really love that. So I went to the Biohack Yourself red carpet premiere in Vegas a few days ago. It was on Sunday. And they interviewed me and they said, so Tim, being a leading biohacker, what is your favorite biohack right now? And I went, losing my voice that was at the time, I don't want to sound boring, but optimize your sleep. Optimize your sleep. I know it's boring. It sounds boring.
They just want more.
Yeah. They want more. Yeah. Do you want the result? Do you want the result or do you want the dopamine?
Yeah.
And it's like, as a biohacker, I'm here in Vegas and I'm usually in bed by 8 p.m., which is half the time difference between the UK and the US. So I know I've only got half the distance when I get back. And here's all the stuff that I do.
Yeah.
So I can operate like this within 36 hours of coming back from Vegas, And it's like, I'm sorry if that sounds boring. And it was a very quick interview.
But quickly, like, listen, the amount of coaches and trained with or interviewed, they would have all been asked, give me how can I lose weight? Or how can I do this or do that? Give me something. What can I do? And it's like, listen, there's at a certain level, when you start getting to sports performance, it starts getting a little bit, specific sporting, body mechanics. But 9 times out of 10, someone that just wants to get a bit stronger or lose a bit of weight, it's nothing to do with the exercise, really. It's about the mindset and what they're willing to do. Are they going to turn up? Are they going to put, I'm not saying you have to kill yourself or so. It's not just about, you see quotes on Instagram, you just keep showing up. No, you have to do something when you get there. But you could go to the gym 3-4 days a week and work at 40-50% of an intensity that, get a good sweat on, and I can give you 5 exercises. Push, pull, press, rotation, and if you turn up with a good attitude and you're willing to do that week in, week out, you will probably get a little bit stronger.
All of this, I mean, the whole mindset side of things is obviously the most important thing of all. Same within healing, when you've damaged yourself, your mindset of where it's going is how your body repairs, not to sound too much like Joe Dispenza or anything, but, really what you focus on is, where your energy goes, is what grows. And whether that's worrying about something, or even if it's down to like your micro choices. If, for instance, if your consistency in showing up is, okay, I don't ever eat processed foods. I only eat good quality meat, good quality vegetables, hydrate properly, that's filtered water, blah, 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 whatever it is. I do not have the croissant. I do not have this. My rule is hard and fast. The mindset is also so important. For instance, I had surgery, as we discussed just before we started filming a few months ago. And, I only had meat and vegetables and drunk actually nettle tea for bone health. And it was great. And then when I got back to London and I'd got over that hump a little bit, it's like, I like a croissant once a week or whatever. It just makes me feel like I can be flexible if I want.
And you had the croissant. And you had the croissant.
Yeah, I did. But the problem is then it creeps back in. And it's like, actually, I'm running late. I haven't had enough food this morning. I need a bit of protein. And I'll grab myself
the justification
whatever. And it's like, then that creeps in. So I guess where I'm leading to is that diet fits into this mindset of training these people very much. So where do you generally find that people come in with their diet? Because obviously travel is a consideration here as well, quality of food or whatever. And where do you generally get them to or hope to get them to?
Right. I mean, first and foremost, a lot of the individuals, certainly with those lifestyles, like you just hit the nail on the head, is with travel and time zones. One of the first things I would try, it's slightly hard when the time zones are extreme. But I'm very much, obviously hydration is, for me, hydration is your version of don't eat McDonald's, it's bad for you. It's just hydration can just solve a lot, help a lot. But in terms of time zones and somebody who's traveling a lot, like David or any of those individuals, is trying to eat consistently and regularly, around your body clock. And again, it's hard when those time zones are. But that's one of my first things that I'm trying to introduce to someone. Try and work with your body around the sleep, around the recovery, around your day, but try and be consistent within an hour or two, just to start with. I try not to be too strict, but if breakfast might be between 7 and 8, lunch might be 12 and 1, and trying to set an infrastructure and then building training into that, building, working around lifestyle, family, and then actually I should say building training and those sort of dietary habits in that. But that's typically where I will start trying to understand someone's lifestyle.
What's their nutrition like?
Fortunately, most of the individuals that I work with, they've all come to me with pretty good dietary habits. Can they be better? Could they cut out a croissant here and there? Yes, for sure. But again, mindset and how it makes them feel, as long as they have that mindset to say, I've had my croissant this week or 2 weeks and I'm not going to have one every day. But fortunately, they're all pretty good. And I think that stems from being, an ex-athlete where they've had that guidance and advice from coaches and nutritionists as part of teams or something like that. So I've been in a position where I'm pretty fortunate with the people that I work with now that they've all come to me pretty decent.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. I mean, I guess they are some of the...
But as we all know, so I should say, there's individuals like David loves his food. If you only have to, I'm telling you anything different, that you go on his Instagram, he loves to, he enjoys his food, good food and very good food and bad food as well. But then that goes into what we just talked about mindset and how that makes them feel. What do they get from that short instance? Does that outweigh the negative effects of that food, every now and then?
So you don't just coach David, you've also partnered with him to launch IM8. And it's a range of top tier supplements. And I got to say, actually, because I was sent some 6 weeks ago, I think it was, and I've been testing it every day.
Tell me.
And when I first got sent it, being completely honest, I was told what the ingredients were, and I was like, it's another celebrity endorsement that's just not going to be near where I want it to be. What
did you ask? Where are those ingredients from?
Well, so exactly. Yeah. So it's like, let's look at the quality and the type. Yeah. And so the first one I looked at was the B12 in it. Yeah. And, I'm not going to go on about, I just want to give the guys listening my thoughts about it. The B12 often is an inactive, crappy form. They came back and said, no, it's methylcobalamin, which is the best active form that works for everyone, opposed to cyanocobalamin, which is, inactive and synthetic and can actually cause more problems than it helps. And then I looked at the folate, and it's methylfolate, which is activated folate, which is so good for supporting your liver, detoxification, energy production. And I went through it line by line. I'm not joking, every single thing. And one of the things that stood out is, a lot of these brands or products like it have proprietary blends. Okay. And proprietary blend, actually by definition, is a formulation that they don't have to disclose what's in it or the volumes in it. Now, one thing that stood out is actually in IM8, they list out everything that's in it. And this is really nice because I could research it properly. So I have implemented it into my morning routine every morning, except for my Vegas trip, to be honest, because I had enough stuff in my suitcase.
And this is 6 weeks. You've been 6 weeks.
My brain feels alive with it. Now, obviously, it's got minerals and minerals and electrolytes in it. It's got amino acids in it as well, which is obviously good for, your neurocircuitry, should I say, hydration elements. It's got, it's packed with stuff, but selectively. And I just want to know, obviously, because it's David's supplement, with you working with him, it's quite a big thing to be working on. What excites you about it most? Because for me, obviously, it comes across that I'm quite excited about it. I wouldn't have expected it to be as good as it is. So
it's huge. Like, for me to be a part of it, anything aligning with David, it's a big deal, but certainly something that in a area that I'm super passionate about. But like you, I'm in my early 40s and been around the block a little bit, and I'm a little bit skeptical and pessimistic about brands coming to market. But I think for me, the excitement, that I'd been introduced to the brand from David and his team, asked me to have a chat with them, some thoughts. They've got a fantastic team. They've absolutely done their due diligence, and I was just kind of the cherry on the cake. But from my understanding, they also wanted to meet me as well in terms of how I approach towards training. And it's sort of, I don't want to say undersell myself, but sort of simplistic approach when we talk about the fundamentals in life. So there was interest on both sides. And I went out at the early part of the journey of the IM8, my journey, went out to go and meet the team. And just because you have a nice time with a bunch of people doesn't mean that they're doing good for the world. But within a couple of hours of being around the people, you've got your David Katz from Preventative Medicine from Yale, you had your James Greens, who's Chief NASA Scientist, just the level of people that were involved, and not just talking about what they're putting in it, but it was about what they wanted to achieve. But alongside of what they wanted to achieve with the product, but it was also how they wanted to do it with the transparency that they wanted to do it. And it was just from what I had originally read about the brand, and when I went out to Hong Kong to go and meet the team, and everything's aligned. You're like, okay, this kind of makes sense. Fast forward when you get the product and you see what's in it. And again, okay, that's great that this is in it, but how much is in it? Where's it from? And then then it started to get really exciting.
Yeah, no, I'd expected it different. To be honest, I really did expect different when I was asked to try it. And as my followers and listeners will know, I don't ever promote anything that I don't love or use myself. It really is that basic, because there's a lot of crap out there. In fact, I got to know someone that was doing a couple of $100 million a year in supplements on Amazon.
Right.
Okay. And I said, how did you do that? That's a lot of money. And he was like 28. And he was like, well, I make sure everything costs me under $4 and I sell it under the sweet spot of $25. And I was like, okay, so, what are the forms? And this, I said, I don't care. It's literally stuffed with absolute poop just to compete for the buy button on Amazon. Right? And that's $200 million a year nearly. And that's a lot of money. There was no ethics there other than making money. And so I'm also very skeptical about these things. Every supplement I ever pick up. In fact, someone messaged me on Instagram this morning, said, Tim, I brought the activated charcoal you recommended, but I see it's got bulking agents and fillers in there. And I was like, it wasn't when I tested it. My God, it's gone from good to bad. So, that's why I'm talking about IMEC, because I'm actually excited. In fact, my partner, she also has it. She's more religious with it than me, to be quite honest. And I think this is because she has a need for more B12, methylfolate, depending around on her cycle. So, it's nice also that one thing I like about it is it's actually got potassium, which helps you retain water better in a good way. So if you're drinking a lot and peeing a lot, potassium will actually stop you from expelling the water so quickly.
Well, I think that was a huge part of it. It's also about engineering something that's peak absorption. There's a lot of products out there that you can be putting all this good stuff in you, but what's your gut doing it? What's your body doing with this to absorb it, to actually benefit from what you're taking? So
micronutrients, micronutrients in terms of you can eat good food, but if you're not getting all the nutrients, and I think it's quite a well-rounded supplement for that. I feel like we're talking about this a lot, like we're promoting it heavy, but actually we're not promoting it heavy. I'm really talking about the value within the product. You buy it, don't buy it, whatever. But the point is it is definitely up there on one of my top tier.
I'm much like you, where I don't work with too many brands, and something at this scale, I really had to believe in it, and it's for me to be. I feel uncomfortable sort of promoting things, and so I don't do too much of it. But genuinely, for me, there was, as I mentioned earlier, I suffer from osteoarthritis. I had a knee surgery in 2008, and while I was doing judo, I did a triathlon 6-7 years ago. I did a marathon. So, in the last 4 or 5 years, my meniscus that I had removed, the meniscus I had left had deteriorated so much so that it's bone on bone. So the inflammation that I suffer there. So there was also for me, beyond the digestive benefits that I wanted and the hydration benefits, the hydration for me was a huge thing. Certainly if I still, against my better judgment at 44, still do quite a lot of heavy sparring. I turn up home moaning about this and moaning about that. But hydration is a huge thing. But for me, there was a supplement that had benefits that would help the inflammation with my osteoarthritis. Now, I've been 4 months or so. I got earlier on before I've been with the brand, product development. So I've had the benefits for a little bit longer than more people who've been buying it. But I'm certainly the inflammation around joints. You can see not just my knees, but my hands from grip fighting from judo. Certainly beginning to feel benefits, and it's not overnight, it's consistency over time that we talked about. But yeah, I'm genuinely excited. Yeah,
me too. I'm glad that we've got this in common about this particular thing and we align on it. I've got here that 92% of the population have at least one mineral or vitamin deficiency, and I expect 92%. Yeah. I expect it's significantly more than that, to be quite honest. So the amount of tests that I've seen and done on myself and others, and I'm pretty well optimized in this stuff, and I test every 2 weeks for specific things.
But it may well be, right? Higher than that. Yeah. Depending on who's being tested.
So exactly. Yeah. So it's crazy. Like if you think, 92% have at least one, well, there's hundreds of all these things. And I think, they say that I think it's about 80% of people are deficient in magnesium alone, which is, people that are addicted to chocolate often have a manganese or a magnesium deficiency, or people that are addicted to eating nuts can have a zinc deficiency, which is just your body being smart with, like, for instance, pregnant women that want pickles and ice cream. What is it in those foods that make them crave that?
But there's a reason for it.
Dogs avoid crap food, most of them, and they only eat stuff that they really like because their senses are smarter than their brains, whereas with us, our brains seem to think they're smarter than our senses. So this is one of the things I like about testing a product that's actually so complete, is because I find that I don't crave for other things and I can trim my supplements back significantly. So for instance, I stopped supplementing with B12 for the first time. I still take extra methylfolate because of my MTHFR gene variation. So I need more than 60% of the population.
Same.
Which is obviously super important for healing, especially joint health and all these things. The other thing is that to touch on the potassium and magnesium side of things, like, magnesium helps relax our bodies and our heart, for instance, and potassium helps it tighten up. And these two is what keeps our heart beating. Yeah. And each mineral has a different benefit, many different benefits, but potassium specifically, for instance, people would be drinking, chugging on their gym bottle of 5 liters of water a day and peeing more and more and more. And the more water they drink, the more they pee. if you add potassium in it, you'll need to drink less water because you're actually retaining
absorbing
it. So the water that you're actually drinking is deficient.
Yeah.
So therefore, you're just drinking more water and flushing more out, which means it makes you more dehydrated and you've got to go to a 6-litre bottle.
Yeah.
Whereas with something like this, it actually gives you the minerals first thing in the morning, which helps your brain fire, which is really good. It helps you retain the water to a healthy level.
Everything that's going in throughout the day. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it sets your day up for the day. It sets your body up for the day, which is really great. And I think, with modern food practices, such as processed foods, they're deficient in a load of this stuff. It really isn't. And even the vegetables that are grown non-organic are deficient because the soil hasn't been rotated and therefore it's lacking the minerals and nutrients it needed in the first place. So, this is why I like this type of thing and why we've gone so heavy into it and how it ties into all of the things that you're doing with, the Beckhams and...
Yeah, but you talked, I don't want to, you're obviously supplementing other things and needs that your body needs. But I think that was a huge part for me. It's got a huge amount of the essentials, good quality essentials. But it was that simplicity that, if you are a busy mum, busy dad, or you're successful, whatever your lifestyle is, but it just simplifies it. But it's simplifying it, it's not just gone, oh, we've got everything. And actually you take a little look and it's like, oh, you look good, but the ingredients, where's it from and how much you've got, what's the dosage in it was another thing. It's great that you've got it in, but what's the dosage? But it genuinely has a shitload in there, a shitload of good stuff in there. And you can remove a bunch of other stuff, which, in this costs a lot.
Yeah.
So if you can just remove complication from your life or financial stress and focus on your well-being with a product that is genuinely got a team behind it, that is their genuine focus, that they want to make a better impact on the world.
Yeah, I love that. And I won't mention names, but someone I know I discussed the other day. So like saying that in the product formulation, it started out fantastic. And I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about another brand right now. Started out fantastic with the right active forms and everything in it. And, in board meetings, it was only ever talking about customer profit, never about how the customers were doing. And it didn't align well with them. And that, they didn't want to just make products cheaper. They wanted to make them higher quality and make clients be better and better and better. And I think it's a common thing. I've seen it with certain other mushroom blends and certain other brands in the space once they've got big and then been, had investment from some of the big, pharma or food companies. Trim back, make bottom line better. And then the product isn't as good.
From a business perspective, I can understand how people,
completely.
I can understand how people do it, but that's why there's people out there like yourself and me sitting here being skeptical about products coming to market and God, here's another one, and is it really going to do what it's going to do? And and
yeah, it's so true.
So yeah, I get it, but it's very rare. So yeah, for me that was really part of I was in Hong Kong on one of my early trips for several days. And you can go for dinner, you can meet someone for half an hour and they can put a good game face on, they've got their pitch, they've got everything. But when you sit, see these people 5, 6, 7 days, day after day in different situations, and they're still talking about, what it is that they want to create and what their beliefs are as an individual. And you're like, oh shit, like you really want to do some good.
So what do you think David thinks of it? The $1 million question.
David loves it. David loves it. David, he genuinely, he's behind it, and with everything he does, he puts everything behind it. And his actually approach is very similar to mine. And I think one of the biggest appeals to him was how simple it is, how much it has in it, how it can get delivered to the body, and how much of an impact that can make to a wider audience. So he's all in.
Well, I think if there's one thing I say about David, and I'm a lifelong fan, actually, just because he's been such a I guess, well, hairstyles, I'm not going to lie.
Absolute legend.
I mean, there's been some that I've avoided massively.
And there's some that I copied.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at mine right now, it's the same as, I'm trying to get it to the same as the new Boss adverts, to be quite honest. But, and the last one was as well. So you'll see my hair evolve. It's similar timeline. But, you know, he's always attached to the biggest or the best brands is one thing I've noticed, you know, whether it's a watch brand or whether or not it's an outfit or, you know, whatever. So, you know, that was one reassurance for me.
But this is also, in terms of brands, and you're absolutely right, he's done a lot, but this is the first time he's attached himself. And by the way, not just attached himself at a certain stage, at the beginning stage, that he's attached himself to a health and wellness product that people are taking and putting into their bodies. So it was a huge thing for him. And I have no doubt that he's had offers thrown at him over the years. But this is something that he really, really backs and believes in. And it was a huge deal for him. You know, he's got a huge influence in terms of hairstyles, you know, so, and he understands, I think, probably the part that he plays with that his name's attached to something. So it had to be of a certain level. I mean,
he's got a brand. He's got his own brand to maintain. I think I remember seeing in one of the newspapers once, actually, which is really funny, that it stuck with me. A reporter went to the most remote parts of the planet, you know, out to the desert, out here, there, and was asking them, "Do you know who David Beckham is?" And this was obviously at the peak. Yeah. And there was no one that he could find anywhere in the world that didn't know about David Beckham. How insane is that? So his reach, you know, and obviously the brand quality, and it stood the test of time as well, to be quite honest. Excellence and everything. So yeah, I really did. It's
not quite
the
same in the judo world. You can pick a world champion, Olympic champion, ask someone at the other side of the world, they will not know.
Oh man. So, well, it's been great to meet you and great to sit down and have a chat after being in contact on socials for a while. And it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much for coming in. I mean, we could talk, I'm pretty sure, for hours longer. And maybe we should do a follow-up at some point, but it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming in today.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much for having me, Tim.
No worries.
See you soon.
You've been listening to the Health Optimization Podcast, and I'm Tim Gray. If you've enjoyed this episode, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe for more. And don't miss the chance to join me and 35 speakers this April in Austin, Texas for the Health Optimization Summit. Tickets are available from hosummit.com/Austin. I cannot wait to get the Paleo Tribe back together again. See you next time, and remember, let's spread the health.